Hello, writers, and welcome to the Author Burnout Coach. Together, we will dismantle the burnout culture in book publishing and reclaim our love of stories. I am your host, Isabel Sterling, and this is episode 13. Y'all, today we are talking about imposter syndrome. You know, the one where you're not sure how you manage to trick everyone into believing you're good at this whole writing thing. The one where every doubt feels like proof that you have zero idea what you're doing. And like, how in the world did anyone ever like one of your stories, let alone pay money for it? Imposter syndrome can happen to you every single stage of writing, from the very first hint of knowing you even want to write, all the way through your first book and your querying process and getting an agent and selling that first book and hitting your, the bestseller list and on and on. It just keeps coming, keeps following you like a puppy, but less cute. And while it can happen at every stage, it most strongly affects people who are socialized as women, BIPOC writers, queer and trans folks, disabled folks, pretty much anyone living in a marginalized identity. And that is very much by design. I recently read this book, Patriarchy, Stress Disorder, by Dr. Valerie Ryan, and she talks about how those of us who are in these like historically marginalized identities have inherited ancestral and continued cultural traumas that affect our ability to feel like success is safe for us. And so we've been taught implicitly and explicitly that success and knowledge and authority don't belong to people like us, that those things belong to other people. And in our patriarchal, white supremacist society, the holders of authority were taught through generations and through our continued culture are cishet, able-bodied white dudes. And that's where the authority lies. It certainly does not lie within us. Now, where this gets tricky, though, it's not like we're walking around thinking, well, I'm not an old white dude, so I can't achieve my dreams. Obviously, I think that's not what's happening. If it sounded so blatant, like we would just call bullshit and be like, that's not a thing. This stuff is really fucking sneaky, and it's subtle, and it sounds just insidiously true. It's like we're reporting just some boring facts about life. And I'll give you an example for me, and you may not relate to this exactly, but let's give us some context. So for me, early in my writing career, I'm thinking like when I'm first I'm writing stories and I'm realizing that I want to be an author, but it just doesn't fully feel like a real thing. And part of that is I remember feeling like writers and librarians and booksellers, these were almost otherworldly figures. These are all like fancy rich people who lived in New York City and came from important families. And, it was like impossible for someone like me from like a small town in a rural part of New York to be part of their ranks. I would see people talk about, making connections with booksellers. And to me, a bookseller was like, I don't know, this like anointed person who had all of this special knowledge about books. It never like occurred to me at that point in my life that a bookseller was, the people who worked at my local Barnes and Noble. When people would mention authors, I could only conjure up these images of, these fancy special people who lived in a fancy place with their fancy friends and had all this formal writing education. They were certainly not someone like me. Not someone from my little hometown. I was boring and too ordinary and too, I don't know, like unimportant, I guess, to ever be part of that world. I just sort of how I thought about it then. I just like, who am I to be somebody like that? And this is where it all ties back around to the patriarchy. This might not have been your experience, but you might relate to some of this is, why did I think I was too boring and plain and unimportant to be a writer? What did I think I was missing that these other people somehow had? And that's where the patriarchy is digging it. It's telling us that who we are isn't good enough for what we want. So if you'd asked me then, I probably just like would have shrugged and been like, I don't know. I don't belong as part of that world. That's not what my family, that's not the kind of people we are. We don't achieve things like that. Authors had to come from prestigious writer backgrounds and they needed to start writing when they were 5 and they had to have all these family connections. And I had all these stories and these beliefs that there must be some sort of external thing that I just was missing and lacked and would never have. And as I said, this is my personal example. This may not specifically resonate for you, but think about any time you're feeling like you don't belong in a career or in a space, or you're sitting around kind of thinking like, am I allowed to just achieve this? Like, is this a thing? It's that same kind of idea, whether it's you get an agent or you get a book deal or you win some kind of like writing contest and you're just like, is this allowed? It's like, am I allowed to have success like this? That is very much a function of the patriarchy, where we don't see that that stuff is for us. It's for someone else. And we may not automatically think, cishet white dude, but it's just we're lacking something. I think that's a lot of what patriarchy does, is it emphasizes in us our lack, perceived lack. We obviously don't have. We are fully functioning, fully worthy human beings, but it tells us this story of lack. So the other piece of imposter syndrome, this goes back to the ancestral cultural trauma thing that I mentioned that's really prevalent in Dr. Valerie's book. And this is sort of the historical danger of success. So historically, it truly was physically dangerous, even deadly, to be successful or powerful or visible as a marginalized person. And of course, to varying degrees, depending on your identity. I think about, the outspoken women who were hanged or burned at the stake for daring to be different, or not even daring to, just trying to be themselves, and people saying that's not okay. I think of the, white hate and the destruction of Black Wall Street in Tulsa. I think of, there's just countless examples at all levels, the big historical events that we know about, or we should know about, and we're not taught because, again, white supremacy and all that bullshit. And also, the individuals who were affected, whose names were lost to time or were intentionally buried by these oppressive forces. This happens historically. And even to this day, there are still overt voices telling us that we don't belong. And again, at varying degrees and at varying levels of obviousness, of course, depending on our identities. I think right now about all of the laws targeting bodies that can become pregnant in different states, all these anti-abortion laws. I think about the Don't Say Gay law in Florida and the legal attacks on trans children in Texas, like all these ways that we are being told that who we are is subject to, approval. Who we are is subject to control by outside forces. So with all of this historical and ongoing trauma swirling around, success often does not feel safe. And not intellectually. Sometimes we don't realize intellectually this is what's happening, but it's sort of deep down on a nervous system level. It's that fight, flight, freeze response, like that level. And this can be, again, both learned sort of through your personal experiences and what you see in your family and just sort of see in the culture and the media, and also can be passed down generationally through epigenetics, which is something that's slightly beyond my skill to explain. It's explained well in the book that I mentioned, but it does truly get passed down. So, even if you've never been unsafe for being successful, surely somebody in your family tree, in your ancestral line was. So when we reach these new levels of success, our body goes, wait a minute, I don't think this is safe. And it happens super fast, not fast enough where we even think about it. And from that feeling of unsafe, we justify it intellectually. So it happens in the body first and then goes to the brain then we have to justify it. So we think, we just don't belong in that arena. It doesn't feel comfortable. It's sort of feeling like success. It doesn't belong to us. That is a huge part of imposter syndrome, part of the cause of it, what creates it. And it's why we think a lot about, you think of who struggles with it the most, people socialized as women, BIPOC folks, LGBTQ plus folks, like, we're the ones who most often struggle with imposter syndrome because we have the highest sort of burdens of these traumas and this sort of not enoughness that we're told implicitly and explicitly. So kind of with all that said, a little bit doom and gloom, sorry, but it's like, spooky episode 13. So we got to talk about this shit. So now that we've talked about it, what the fuck do we do about it? Because it's not like we can change the past and we can't snap our fingers and eliminate all of the patriarchal and white supremacist BS that perpetuates this. So friends, in order to start shifting this, I would like to invite you to Celebration Station, which sounds silly, but it tickles me, so I like it. And I want you to first know that celebration is not optional and it's not frivolous. If you want a life where you love writing and you're not burnt out, celebration is not optional. And it is not something that we reserve for exciting big accomplishments. I want you to set up camp in Celebration Station and visit as often as you possibly can. Intentional celebration is how we normalize new levels of success and visibility to the world in our nervous systems. It's how we show these primal parts of us that kind of freeze and oh shit, like that quick sort of body, like, oh God. It's how we show that part of ourselves that success is safe, that it's something that we want to continue to create. Think of how many times we do something and we succeed and then we sort of like backtrack a little bit. That's this, we have success and our body freaks out and then we have to sort of retreat. But when you celebrate, it's how we show ourselves and our nervous systems and eventually show others and demonstrate for others that people like us do have knowledge and authority and wisdom, and that we do belong in these spaces and at these levels of success and at every level of success. This is what starts to unwind imposter syndrome so you can feel at home in your own brilliance. And I want to say that again because I think it is so important. When you celebrate every little win, you unwind imposter syndrome one step at a time until you feel at home in your own brilliance. This is, of course, an infinitely ongoing process. As we continue to grow and evolve, we're going to keep bumping up against these responses that go, wait, this isn't safe. And every time that happens, it's okay. It gives us an opportunity to practice celebrating and soothing that stress response. Every time we grow, we reach these new realms, this new stage of success. We feel like an imposter. We're like, how the hell did I get here? One of the adults going to tell me that we've made a mistake and I need to go back to kind of like where I was. That's going to keep happening. And what we need to do is celebrate all those little successes that helps us acclimate to that new way of being. We let that become our new normal. That is just who we are. And once we've acclimated and that is who we are now, we can begin the process of climbing and improving and growing again. So I invite you also, when we talk about celebration, I don't want celebration to just be in your head. The thought of like, oh yay, I did that thing, which is important too. But I invite you to bring that into your body in whatever way that feels good. Do a little happy dance, treat yourself to some fresh air, to some warm sun, eat something you love, hug your favorite person, snuggle your pets, bring it into your body because that's part, again, this trauma and stuff lives in our bodies. So we also want to celebrate in our bodies in whatever way that feels good. You want to, grab your cat, give her all the pets and, tell your cat what a great job you did just by showing up and chasing your dreams. And I know this might sound small or insignificant, especially in the face of generations of patriarchy and racism and all of the sort of big bads of the world, but it's so vital. And if you're sitting there and be like, screw this is super uncomfortable, I am certainly not celebrating. The more uncomfortable it feels to you, the more you need it. But it can truly start small and it can start private. It does not have to be something you share with the world. It can be a 10-second happy dance after each writing session. A little wiggling in your chair, like a little happy. It could be, a quick fist pump as you close the laptop of like, heck yeah, I did it. It could be a high five in the mirror in the morning. It can be something so small. But I really challenge you to pick something that you want to celebrate and how you're going to do it, and just do it for a month. Your relationship to writing cannot help but change when you celebrate in this way. And it's going to help you chip away at your imposter syndrome too. And speaking of, if you're considering working with me and you're like, I don't know if I belong, I want to offer that you do. It is just this imposter syndrome nonsense. In my program, it is for writers of all stages who want to reconnect with their love of writing and burnout-proof their career. If that's you, let's make it happen. Visit isabelsterling.com. You can enroll right away and we'll go ahead and schedule your first session, or you can schedule a call if you have questions before you fully decide. Okay, let's celebrate. I want you to celebrate just acknowledging that it's something you want and are going to do later, and celebrate that it's something that you want and are going to do now, and celebrate just the fact that you're here listening to this podcast and you're willing to do these things that I tell you. I really, truly think it is so important. It seems small, it really does, but it is just everything, especially if we want to create an experience of the writing where we just love the work that we're doing. Even on the days we don't enjoy doing it, we still love it in general. I just think that's so important. Anyway, until next time, my friends, happy writing, happy celebrating, and I will see you next week.